one of the hot areas right now, obviously, is mobile and location-based services. And I think the guy who's really the poster child for location-based services, because he's been at it so long and with so much intensity and infectious enthusiasm, and because he's got the hot company of the moment, is Dennis Crowley, co-founder of Foursquare. So, Dennis, please join us. And the final guest for this panel is the president and CEO of a company that I think has absolutely revolutionary potential, is at the intersection of more trends than you can count, and is setting out to change the world. I'd like you to welcome Steve Cousins, who's the president and CEO of Willow Garage. And you'll learn from Steve what he does. So let's start with you, Dennis. I mean, I assume, how many people here use Foursquare? Oh, wow. Not enough of you, and not enough check-ins here.
Working on it.
So maybe then I should ask you to tell us the story of Foursquare, how you happened to come to it, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, do people know what Foursquare is? That's good, all right? Because I used to give these talks and no one would know, and it would take me a half an hour to describe the whole thing. But again, the gist of it is we built this platform for mobile phones that enables people to check into places, and allows you to share the places that you go to and share the places that you like with your social graph. And so we've been doing this for a while. Like, I used to have another startup called Dodgeball, and I've been experimenting in this space since like 2001 or so. And initially, it was all about just like knowing where your friends were, so that I live in New York, and it's all about trying to make New York more efficient and make like cities easier to use. And just like, if you have this general awareness of where all your friends are, if like this imagined map of where they happen to be, it just makes it easier to meet up with them. So that was the original idea behind a lot of this stuff. But then as we started getting people checking in, one day at a time, or a couple times a day, or a couple times a week, you start amassing all this data. And the data is really interesting. It's like who is hanging out with what people over time. And you can start using that.
And where are they hanging out?
And yeah, specifically where they're hanging out. It's like people go to this coffee shop, people shop at these places, people like to go to these places with their friends, or go to these places alone. And you can cut that data up to do really fascinating things with it.
Yeah. So. Well, actually, I'll come back to a question for you in a minute. Let's get Steve introduced. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about what you do at Willow Garage and why.
So we're a robotics company, and we're about 4 years old, and we've basically set out to try to bring automation out of factories, where it's been very effective over the last 20 years, and out into the real world. So you can see one of our robots, the PR2, out here on display, and Eric and Keenan, who designed that robot, are here and doing a great job of showing off their vision of getting from a prototype at Stanford to we've got now 11 robots that we've given away into the world, and we're starting to sell them. So you say, what are these robots good for? And we're looking at a time frame that's longer than a typical internet startup. In fact, we're not a typical startup at all. If I go back a little bit, we're set out to do impact, and we believe that having impact, and our funders believe that having impact is more important than return on capital. So return on capital becomes the second goal. And impact, the best way we can think of to have impact, being software guy, Scott Hassan, who founded the company, and myself, is either software or automation in general is just a huge lever. So if you pour money into that and you're doing it in a good thing, you can cause more impact to happen. So that was kind of the premise. And we started off playing in the robotics space a little bit, in the autonomous cars. There's a DARPA Urban Challenge, DARPA Grand Challenge. And we played around with this autonomous boat that was supposed to sail around the world. And then we discovered Eric and Keenan at Stanford, who were building this prototype of a robot that's like Rosie from the Jetsons, but without the attitude, right? So it's got 2 arms. It can move around. It could, potentially lift prepare you breakfast or something, push a vacuum cleaner, help somebody out in a factory situation. It's really a way to again, automate. And it's a little bit early days for that kind of robots for a few reasons. And one of the things we liked about their project was that they had identified a way to make the arms safer. So if you look at an industrial robot arm, if you work for Toyota, there's a red line in the factory, or basically a cage. If you go inside that cage without all the safeties disabled, you're fired. That's the rule, right? End of story. Because it's just too dangerous, and Toyota doesn't want somebody getting killed by a robot inside their plant. If you're going to have robots going around the home, you need a completely different situation. So the robots become designed differently. But we're not quite ready to put those robots out in the world. It's a 10 or 15-year process before they're going to be ready. And so the question is, how do you get the technology how do you work on a problem that far out in a startup, right? And so if you have the funding, that's a good start. And then if you want to really take off, and we talked about being a catalyst in the last session, if you really want to be a catalyst for an industry to get started, and that's really what we're going for, the way you do that, and the way we've found to do that, is just go open source. So we've basically built a community of all the best robotics people around the world who are all now working on a common software platform that came out of this robot development project. We've given away 11 of those robots to the best universities that we can find. They all have them now, and we're getting to the point where there can be a kind of a robot app store. Now it's on a much, much smaller scale than the iPhone, right? There's 11 of them, we have 10, so there's 20 in the world. It's not like iPhones. But nevertheless, understand that in robotics, the way things were before we got started was you would go to a conference, and you'd show somebody a video of what you made your robot do. Right? Now, if you go to these conferences, it only did it once. Right? All the other times are not on that video. You don't have outtakes typically at the conference. So I show you my video, you show me your video, and we go, oh, my video's cooler, and you can argue about it. Right? That's not really science. Right? Science is about repeatability of experiments. And so if you get to a point where you have a common hardware platform and software platform, and you can say, I packaged up my application, and somebody at University of Pennsylvania was able to run it, then they can actually do the experiment over again. And that is a huge change. So we've done this sort of open source operating system that runs on lots of robots, plus this robot that has a lot of capability, and put all those things together to really try to transform the field of robotics.
All right. So you might ask, OK, wait a minute. We got the original web entrepreneur. We've got a guy who's the cutting edge of location-based services on mobile, and a robotics guy. OK, what do these guys have in common? I mean, what do you guys see as a common thread? I see you got a big vision. You started before there was anybody else really trying to make you're not Me Too companies.
Yeah.
Everybody else is Me Tooing after you. And, you are, in fact, changing the world.
Well, I mean, I love the story that you're telling, and I'm like, that's kind of crazy. And I have a feeling that that's the position that we've all been at some position where you tell this story. We've told the Foursquare story 100 times over the last 2 years, and it started off with this is never going to work. You guys are crazy. To hey, we get to sit up on these panels, which is with all these amazing people. And I have a feeling you're probably in the same spot. Like you tell these stories over and over again, people continue to think you're crazy until you manage to prove them wrong.
So. Dennis, one of the things that you've done a lot with in Foursquare is you've done some pretty clever social engineering of the friend network that has been built up. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about encouraging, user behavior?
Yeah, so it's funny, like this, for those of you who's Foursquare have heard about it, like there's a game component behind it. And it's not a game, but what we're trying to do is like make these tools that we use all the time, like the social graph and maps and city guides, like those things should be playful. Like, going out with your friends and finding new restaurants, like those are fun behaviors. And so a lot of our thinking was like, how do you, not just how do you make the city easier to use from like a utility perspective, but how do you make these tools that we use all the time, how do you make them more fun? And just how do you make like your Saturday nights more fun? And so that's where a lot of the ideas came from. Like, what if, it's like, let's turn life into a game. Let's look at, a Saturday night as almost like a leaderboard. How do I compete with my friends and measure who's going out and doing the most adventurous things? And so, that's where we're finding that the game mechanics in Foursquare work really great at motivating people to do more interesting things. Like, we make these little badges and we reward people with, with these little, badges.
So you're a gym rat,
Yeah.
It's like we encourage people to be healthy, right?
Yeah, go to the gym 10 times to get the gym rat badge. Go hike 10 mountains to get the Great Outdoors badge. And some people get so nutty over the badges and wanting to collect them all, like Pokemon, that they go out and they do these things. They'll go track down 20 different pizza places. They'll go to 10 different art galleries. And it's like this idea of using software to change the way that people experience the real world and encourage people to do stuff that they normally wouldn't do. Like there's something very powerful behind that.
Yeah, and that idea is spreading. I mean, I know Michelle Obama has been behind this idea of can we come up with games to get kids to do more healthy behavior.
Yeah.
A great example, I think, inspired in part by what you've done.
Yeah.
So let me talk a little bit about crowdsourcing again. Jerry, we started talking about it, but I think each of you has kind of an interesting crowdsourcing story in any order.
Well, I'll just give you an example. It's not exactly crowdsourcing because, again, it's on a much, much smaller scale.
Yeah.
But we asked for people to do just a cool video. So we try to do things really fast because robotics typically takes a long time. It's really hard. You have to build the hardware. You got to build the software. You got to integrate it all together. It's electronics, and so we ask people, just put together a video of the robot doing something cool. This is to the 11 places, and you have 6 weeks, right? And that's it, 6 weeks. And some of the people didn't realize there was a contest until 2 days before, and they put it together anyway. So you can do things really fast. And when the robot's actually manipulating the world, it's cool. So the #1 application, the one that we judged as winner, was sock pairing, right? So it actually takes a sock and turns it inside out.
You actually can find the other sock.
No, well, there's 2 socks on the table.
Yeah, that's cheating if you give the robot all the socks.
Okay. One's inside out. But it's like fascinating to watch something work autonomously. I mean, if you see the video on towel folding that Berkeley did, it's just fascinating. It picks it up, and it did 50 towels in a row, right? There's a stack of 50 towels. It just picks them up, shakes it out, folds it up using a table, and smooths it out. That smoothing out action is like really great on the video. It's just like, looks so great, right? And you put it over here, and they come up with this stack of towels, and you're like, that's amazing, right? How can you deal with that when industrial robots are like, I need to get to this millimeter position and go to that position, and everything's very precise. And this is just the opposite. And the thing, it's just so much fun to watch. One of the teams did playing a band. So they had a keyboard and a drum over here, and they had the robot playing songs. They basically feed it MIDI music. And they did this over a weekend at the University of Pennsylvania. And they're playing Beatles songs and things, just feeding it in, and it's playing the drums and stuff. It's like, it's really cool.
So, but this goes back to your robot app store. I mean, what you would have in the app store are actually these behaviors, effectively. So
yeah, and the theme is fun.
Yeah.
Right? That's the sort of common theme here. It's just fun.
But in some sense, they're also then being shared. How the robot becomes more capable because somebody is saying, okay, I built a behavior for the robot. Here it is. You can have this behavior too. So the robots are going to get smarter over time as more and more people start building behaviors for them.
And before anybody says, and not take over the world.
That's right. I mean, so Sarah Connor's gunning for you at some point.
Exactly.
But yeah.
But I think in our example, at least Yahoo, I think Flickr was probably one of the first version of crowdsourcing. We didn't know it back then, but I think it was that. But right nowadays, whether it's we bought a company called Associate Content, and they have people who are contributing content of all forms on a part-time basis, on the demand basis. We would put out a request to have something written about the 5th anniversary of Katrina, and we would get back first-hand accounts. And what I think is happening with crowdsourcing in general, not only around content but around sales forces or anything else, policing or sort of protecting the communities. There's this notion that, hey, if you can figure out how to drive some quality, drive some relevance, whether it's algorithmic or human produced, and try to create a marketplace where people who are participating in these crowdsourcing exercises are compensated through the right licensing or however you do it, it's really powerful. And actually, it goes to this notion of innovation to the last, to the end, to the individual, where we need to give them the tools, we need to open up the code, we need to open up the infrastructure to them to be able to do it. But I think people inherently want to be productive, want to have fun, to Dennis's point. I mean, everything, if you can make it into more of a game rather than a chore, you're going to get more productivity out of them. So I think these things are all related. And I just love the robotic example. I think if I can get a towel folding robot, I would be a hero at home.
So innovation actually can come from crowdsourcing. I think I'd love to have you, Dennis, talk a little bit about, again, I don't know how far along you are with developing the Foursquare business model, but it seems to me that some of your participants in your ecosystem invented your business model, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so we've been crowdsourcing, pretty much everything. So like even when we would launch city by city, like we would turn on Vancouver and there'd be no bars and restaurants in the system, nothing to check into, and then 24 hours later there's 2,500 places to check into. Like the users just go and create the content for us. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so then that's happened all over the world. Like there's something like 8 million, so say between 6 or 8 million, I think, Foursquare venues now. They've just been created by just people all over the world that are using the service. And we're seeing
people adding tips also.
People adding tips, people adding venues, people adding just like random interesting things, like a whole bunch of like 9/11 memorials just popped up as venues. But we really see a lot of innovation coming from the people that use the product. It's not just the users, the people that are checking in, but it's the venues, the people that see the people checking in to their places. And so what's starting to become our business model, like offering these specials to merchants and to local users, depending on who's the mayor of a place, who's been there 10 times. Like we didn't invent that stuff. That stuff came from the venues. Like summer before, as Foursquare was just starting to pick up, we saw coffee shops in San Francisco hanging flyers around the neighborhoods like, hey, come here and show us that you checked in on Foursquare and we'll give you a discount. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a great usage. Like we reached out, we would talk to some of the merchants, we realized a whole bunch of people were doing this, like doing the ad hoc flyer stuff, and we talked to those folks and we ended up building a product around it. And now what we're seeing is, now our mission is to try to bring that product to millions of businesses across the US, and it's the users that are doing that. Like we get these smart-ass users that are awesome. They go into coffee shops and they say, hey, I'm the mayor here, or I've been here 10 times, what do I get for free? And they're like, I don't know what Foursquare is. I don't know what it means to be the mayor. But then, you get...
So I bet a bunch of people in the audience don't know what it means to be the mayor either. Yeah. So actually, you should probably
if you're the mayor of a place on Foursquare, it means you've been there more than anyone else, right? So people fight over being the mayor of the park or their office or the coffee shop, right? And like there's these big things, like these big mayor battles that get written up in papers and people make flyers. People go nuts over this stuff. But someone will go, this happens all the time. We hear the story, oh, I'm the mayor of my pizza place, what do I get? And the pizza place is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that happens 4 or 5 times before finally it's like, what is this Foursquare thing? And it's the users that are teaching the venues that the venue should be on Foursquare. So we're kind of like crowdsourcing a sales force in a sense. And like we're in the very early days of figuring out how that works, but it's worked for everything else we're doing, so like why wouldn't it work for that?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because it really does suggest that when you have a technology transition, you end up with new business models that come out of left field. When we started with the web, it was my first idea of web advertising was influenced by those bingo cards used to have in industry publications. Some of you probably remember those. It was like, oh wow, we can do websites that will be the destination, for what used to be a bingo card, and you'll be able to have a catalog and people will go look at stuff online. And then along came all the other forms of advertising, but it was keyword advertising on a search engine that really sort of ignited this next big phase, and nobody thought of that at the beginning. And I think what we're seeing that now is we're starting to embrace location-based services on mobile, and there's a lot of sort of thinking about, well, what will the advertising model look like? What will the business model look like? And I think we're going to be surprised. And I think what's happening organically with Foursquare is a great example of the market teaching us, where that business model might be. But I'd love to, any thoughts that you have, Jerry, on that, if you've been thinking about.
I think you're exactly right in that probably the best business models haven't been figured out yet. And consumers, and I know AJ Lafley talked about this morning, but I think consumers are ultimately going to tell us where to go. And even at Yahoo, when we force a business model that doesn't quite work with consumers, it never really works. And so you have to ultimately trade that balance between, do you monetize early or do you really go with consumerism? And I think, especially this day and age, being able to really leverage where the consumer wants to go and make the monetization with that seamless is really critical. But in a different way, I think people who are getting what they want are willing to pay a lot more. And so you have this almost bimodal where if you're happy with something, you're going to pay a lot more to that place. And if you're unhappy, you want to do everything you can to get away from it. So I think consumers are becoming a lot more intelligent as well.
Yeah. So another aspect of crowdsourcing is open source. Gary, you've been a big open source proponent with, not Gary, Gary works for you, Steve. Yeah. Gary Bradsky wrote OpenCV, which is this fabulous machine learning package for computer vision, and works on this. And one of the really fascinating things we were talking, Jerry and I were talking earlier about machine learning, is that computer vision and a lot of stuff that's happening on the web actually use the same algorithms, and that's really worth thinking about. But sorry, a little aside there. I just sort of want to ask, how much do you think open source drives innovation?
It's pretty interesting. Open source, to me, IP is friction, right? So friction isn't all bad, right? I was coming down the mountain this morning, and without friction, it was going to be really bad. But it's not all good either, right? And IP, when you open things up, things change dramatically. So, for example, we give away the software and completely open BSD license, so anybody can use it for commercial or non-commercial. And suddenly, because it's not ours, because it's a community thing, and we actually put it on a ROS.org site instead of on willowgarage.com, because it's on a .org site, because it's everybody's, all these different robotics people are willing to contribute in a way that they wouldn't be willing to if it was our code, right? And so even though it's open source, it's not just that it's open source, it's that it's open source and you can take it and form a company on it. So we're not the ones who are going to commercialize it and you're doing slave labor. That makes a huge difference to people. And there's definitely a place for companies to take off, but one of the companies that has a PR2 robot now is Bosch. And Bosch, the reason that we gave them one in our beta program was because they committed to open source. And think about a company the size of Bosch, which makes auto parts and drills and things and all kinds of different products. They're a worldwide conglomerate. A company that size deciding that they're going to do open source is just really surprising. It doesn't happen very often. Intel's done it to some extent. They're the ones who originally supported OpenCV. IBM's talked about it and done it in some ways. But it's very unusual. And the reason that they do it is because they say, we have a very clear business model. Robots could take off in 10 years, and we're going to be the robots' parts makers. And so we can give away software all we want because we're never going to be a software company. So let's contribute to this open source software and become a part of the community. It really makes a difference.
That kind of goes back to that create more value than you capture.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Be part of building something. So I just wanted to open this up to questions from the audience. If anybody wants to ask any of us here a question, feel free to go to the mics. Lacking that, I'm going to ask, and you guys, you guys think about the future. You've got to. So when you think about the future, what's going to surprise us the most over the next few years?
For me, that's easy. It's what application is going to come out in robotics. Because robotics is like, well, I mean, people ask me all the time, what are you going to do with these robots, right? And it's not just folding towels, right? You can do lots and lots of stuff, but what's the really important thing? And the answer is you can't even think about that until you have robots. Once you have robots, then you can go out and build it. The spreadsheet didn't come out until there were PCs readily available. And we don't actually in robotics say killer application because it has a different meaning there. But, but what is the equivalent of a spreadsheet for robotics?
Yeah.
Well, I think with all the opportunity we're talking about here, and obviously all the stuff that's going on in our world, I do think there is a, how do I say this without being negative about it? But I do think that there is going to be more challenges around how we govern and how do we make sure that assuming this trend continues, where every individual can be part of a creative and innovative process. I think in some way that's really good. I also think that may mean that other people with the same tools can do bad. And I think how do we create a system where this stuff is sustainable is really a critical question that we should think up front. And it's not that robotics or location services or Yahoo by itself could be part of that, but I do think that the more you empower individuals, the more you do things, then one person or one entity could do some damage in a system. And I'm really struck by this notion of, how do we create impact, but for our next generation. I was saying to Tim earlier, I'm sort of living through my kids' eyes, seeing the world through my kids' eyes, and there's nothing in my mind more special, but also more worrisome about seeing the world through a 6-year-old eyes. And the question she would ask me, really worries me about the future, and whether it's on the energy environment side, whether it's on the biology side, whether it's certainly on the robotics side. And I think, to me, doing good is not just giving money away. It's about solving some of these problems that we have the technology, and I think we have the brains to do it now. And it's something that I hope we all take away and think about.
All right. Well, they're giving us the red light, so I think that means we got to wrap.
Got to hear
Unless you
Dennis.
got something really quick to add to the.
well, yours is really deep. I feel.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, like, we always talk about the stuff we're building as like technology that facilitates serendipity, or that makes these little chance encounters happen. And so whether it's like a room of people that don't know each other that have information to share, or whether like you're walking down a street in a strange city, like those are like situations that present problems that could be solved with some of the stuff that we're doing. Like I desperately want the application on my phone that scans for everyone here and tells me the 10 people I need to talk to before I leave today. And when I have 2 hours to kill down in Phoenix, like before my flight, I wanted to go to my social graph and tell me what are the 5 things I got to do if I have 2 hours to kill. And so that's the type of stuff that we're trying to solve. And like we're getting to the point where the phones are smart enough, the graph is out there, the geo tools and the social tools are there. It's just putting all the pieces together, and just making that stuff happen.
All right, sounds awesome. All right, thank you very much.